Welcome to the channel. I'm Task Force Bourbon. Tonight we have something special in store. Yet again, we're going to be doing a blind flight fight. Tonight we have, as you can see before you, the taters are going to tate. It's going to be the mash bill number 2 from Buffalo Trace. Before we begin that blind flight fight, as is normal with Task Force Bourbon's stuff, we will be talking a little bit about what a single barrel is. We'll talk a little bit about what mash bill 2 is. And then we'll go into each one of these bourbons, what they are and how they came to be. So go ahead and kicking that right off. We'll talk about what the difference between a single barrel is. So it's right there in the name. A single barrel is a single barrel of bourbon, literally. Pulled from the rickhouse, usually by the master distiller. However, that can vary between the size of the distilleries, like Buffalo Trace, from the master distiller himself, in which case it'll usually be denoted on the bottle as a small sticker. In the case from Buffalo Trace, a bronze, silver, or gold medallion that'll say who picked it, like a store pick, or master distiller Harlan Wheatley from Buffalo Trace picked. But normally you'll find single barrels are selected either from a master taster that is on site at that distillery, or a team from that distillery as well. And really, as odd as it might sound, there is no TTB ruling, right, for the definition of a single barrel. And why that's important is because you move into something like the small batch, which again does not have a legal definition associated to it as of yet. So when you look at something from like Lux Row Distillers that's done a double barrel expression, they've labeled it just that, but technically 2 barrels becomes a small batch. And you can look at like a craft distiller where you'll see anywhere between 10 to 20 to 50 barrels, or someone big like Jim Beam or Buffalo Trace small batches where they might range upwards of 200 barrels go into that makeup. And then their large batch standard blend is really just a mesh of different barrels all put together to make that standard, same consistent brand profile that they're looking for. However, what's really unique about Buffalo Trace's single barrels is that they're fairly consistent in flavor profile. Most notably among it, love it or hate it, Blanton's, right? It's aged in, well, we'll get into that, warehouse H, a tin-clad metal warehouse. But because of that control, and look at stuff like E.H. Taylor, where most of that is aged in warehouse C, that control is really what helps it have that brand consistency. So when you get a single barrel from Buffalo Trace, they usually tend to stay in that same, range of consistency. But with that said, a single barrel is just being just that. It is single. It is unique. It can range very wildly from single barrel to single barrel to single barrel to single barrel, and you could get something that's fantastic, or you can get something that is maybe less than fantastic. But going into Buffalo Trace's Mash Bill 2, which all these are from. So a real quick caveat, this is Mash Bill 2 in its entirety, with the notable exception of Ancient Age. That's a larger batch bourbon, typically referred to as a bottom shelf offering. They have Ancient Age and they have Ancient Age, which used to carry an older age statement, and that's been removed as of late. But that's not in the lineup because it's not a single barrel. So just as a one-off note to everybody who might be viewing this probably later, these are the only single barrel offerings from mash bill number 2. Buffalo Trace uses really 2 core main mash bills. That's mash bill number 1 and mash bill number 2, really aptly named. Mash bill number 1, again, these are all undisclosed mash bills. So we don't officially know what is in those mash bills as far as percentages. We know that obviously to be a bourbon, it has to be 51% or more of corn, right? But how that mash bill actually, equates out to is undisclosed. But we have, and these been around for quite some time, a lot of educated guesses to help us narrow that mash bill down. And we believe mash bill number 1 is probably 10% or less rye, right? Whereas mash bill 2 is somewhere in the range of 10 to 12 to upwards of 15% rye. And that's important for us consuming these because mash bill 2 is a little more consistent with what's on the bourbon market in terms of rye content percentages. All right, but the really untalked about aspect of mash bill number 2 for Buffalo Trace is the convoluted relationship that it has with one of its parent organizations. So we have Sazerac, but we also have Age International Incorporated, which owns the labels. Right? Buffalo Trace makes the bourbon and distributes in the United States. However, Buffalo Trace only acknowledges, and this is unique, these three on its website. It does not acknowledge, you can go ahead and look it up right now on its website, Hancock's President's Reserve, HPR for short. Right? So I'll probably refer to them as that. We got Hancock's President Reserve, which comes in at a 44.45% alcohol by volume. And then, to keep it more simple, this is a 100 proof offering from Rock Hill Farms, RHF. Elmer T Lee, ETL at 90 proof. And then Blanton's, which comes in at 93 proof every single time. So, really, minus the exception of the exact location of where they're aged, right, and their proof levels, realistically, other than that, they should be the same. But we know, all us bourbon folks in the group, that bourbons can range wildly, even amongst single barrels in the same brand lineup. I've already said it, but Buffalo Trace does a really well job of keeping that brand consistency for their single barrel offerings. And we're gonna go ahead and very shortly see which one of these takes the crown home. But before we do that, as promised, we're going to go a little bit into each one of these bourbons and talk about some of their background. And we're doing it in this order for a reason, right? Hancock's President's Reserve, even though it's not officially acknowledged on their website, the namesake at least holds a really near and dear place in Buffalo Trace's history. And let me go ahead and put this out there. So only a little bit of information really known about this. But according to Sazerac, quote, in 1775, the Leestown settlement, sorry, I just lost my place here, was established along the banks of the Kentucky River by Willis and Hancock Lee. Soon it became a well-known shipping port for tobacco, hemp, and whiskey. The Buffalo Trace Distillery's origins date back to 1792, the year the oldest standing building on the site, the Riverside House, was built by Commodore Richard Taylor. A proper distillery wasn't built until 1812. But there is evidence that distilling on the site predates not only the 1812 distillery, but even Taylor's Riverside House. According to Buffalo Trace Distillery's timeline, there is, quote, evidence of distilling as early as 1775 on land that would later house the Buffalo Trace Distillery. That land was surveyed by Hancock Lee, who later in 1775 shared his whiskey with the English diarist Nicholas Creswell. Hancock Lee disappears from the timeline in 1786, but as Sazerac says, this, quote, single-barrel bourbon whiskey pays tribute to the pioneering spirit of Hancock Lee. This is the lowest proof offering amongst these single barrelings, coming in at a very bizarre 88.9 proof, right? I did that math just now, so I did not have that written down, I promise. I did. All right, but the basically long and short of it is Hancock Lee is really responsible for surveying that land where Buffalo Trace is now at. And if it wasn't for him and his pioneering spirit, as Sazerac put it, there may or may not have been a Buffalo Trace. So that's essentially what happened. When we had him come in and basically settle that settlement. And so we'll move on to Rock Hill Farms next. Again, this is something that's not a lot is known in terms of the lineage, but it's apparently named for the rich farmland along the Kentucky River. Rock Hill Farms. Rock Hill Farms was the highest proof mash bill number 2 bourbon sold in the U.S. until in 2020 when it was eclipsed by Blanton's Gold. The two main differences is their warehouse locations and the proof, right? Each bottle of Rock Hill Farms is aged about 8 to 9 years, bottled at 100 proof, and is believed to be pulled from, quote, sweet spots in warehouses I, C, and K. So I'm going to go ahead and read this, but the flavor of bourbon comes from the mash bill, the combination of great ingredients, the oak wood, a barrel, and the combination of time and temperature in the rickhouse. Identical bourbons, aged for the same period of time in separate parts of the warehouse, can taste drastically different due to the temperature factors. The master distiller even periodically has barrels moved around to even out the impact of temperature. Because there is no temperature regulation in the warehouses, during the winter months, barrels contract and expand during the summer heat. Additionally, on the cooler lower floors, water is more likely to penetrate the barrel from surrounding moisture, lowering the proof. On the hotter, higher floors, heat causes the water to evaporate from the barrels much faster, called the angel share, raising the proof. As the bourbon heats and cools, it moves by diffusion and mass flow in and out of the barrel staves, which increases the extraction of flavor for the wood. So that should be no new news to anybody watching this channel. But that's sweet spots, the I, C, and K in the warehouses apparently do that the best. That's a so what. So Elmer T Lee is extremely important. So while these first two might be extremely important in terms of at least their namesake contribution to Buffalo Trace, especially the Hancock's President Reserve, Elmer T Lee and Blanton's really take the cake. And that's because essentially these two, in tandem, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, are really responsible for the single barrel movement. And it starts with Elmer T Lee. He was one of the great master distillers of Buffalo Trace for 36 years. He was hired by Colonel Blanton in 1949 as a maintenance engineer after serving in World War II as a radar bombardier. He worked his way through the ranks until he was promoted to master distiller in the early 80s, but soon retired in 1985. Even after retirement, ETL served as master distiller emeritus. ETL was a key figure in resurrecting bourbon from the ashes of the 60s and 70s. One of his contributions was creating Blanton single barrel bourbon in 1984. His namesake bourbon was created in 1986, and ETL hand-selected the barrels used for his namesake single barrel bourbon into his 90s. He passed in 2013 at the good old age of 93 years old. From the Buffalo Trace website, quote, named after master distiller ETL, this whiskey is hand-selected and bottled to the taste and standards of ETL himself, perfectly balanced and enriched as declared by the man who knows how great bourbon should taste. While ETL and Blanton's are both single barrels, use the same mash bill, and don't carry age statements, however, Buffalo Trace master Harlan Wheatley claims ETL to be 9 years old, and Blanton's is rumored to be near the same. ETL is bottled at 90 Kentucky proof versus 93 for Blanton's, but the difference lies in the warehouse that they come from. Blanton's historically only comes from the metal-clad warehouse H, while ETL comes from either wooden or brick warehouses. According to Wheatley, ETL is typically pulled from the upper levels of those warehouses. All right, so that's Elmer T Lee. And then last but definitely not least, love it or hate it, Blanton's. All right, Tater Love, let's go ahead and show it out for those who know. You know. Albert Bacon Blanton, by the way, cool middle name, was born into a bourbon family and started working at a distillery adjacent to his family home at a young age. He would work to become a pioneer in the bourbon industry and eventually became president of the distillery, which was then known as the Old Fire Copper Distillery, OFC. Colonel Blanton kept the distillery running through Prohibition by producing medicinal whiskey, and he remained at the distillery through its different variations for 31 years until he retired in 1952. Following Colonel Blanton's death in 1959, the master distiller at the OFC distillery, which was then known as the George C. Stagg Distillery, known as Buffalo Trace, created this, had this expression created. Buffalo Trace says, quote, the bourbon was first developed by Elmer T Lee in 1984 as a high-end expansion in a time when bottom shelf bourbon sales were struggling. Named after former distillery president Colonel Albert Bacon Blanton, Elmer recalled how Colonel Blanton would hand-pick, quote, honey barrels from the center cut of Warehouse H for the many parties Blanton held, said the distillery in a press release. Many years later, the distillery called upon Elmer to create a new bourbon in 1984, and Blanton's was born, the world's first single-barrel bourbon. Blanton's is still produced from Warehouse H, a tin-clad building commissioned for construction by Colonel Blanton and built hastily at the end of Prohibition. The intention, this is a pretty little-known fact, was to make a metal warehouse to age whiskey faster, which obviously was suddenly in demand again. As a result, the warehouse tends to get warmer during the summer days than others. Like other warehouses at Buffalo Trace, Warehouse H is also steam heated during the winter, further aiding the aging process. And the most notable side fact here about Blanton's is the horse and jockey and the bottle stoppers are now recognized trademarks of Blanton's single barrel bourbon. The set features a horse and jockey in different strides and poses, resembling the stages of a horse race. Each stopper is marked with a single letter that spells Blanton's when the set has been completed. You go ahead, collect all letters, send them in, and they'll send them back to you on a barrel stave set in there. And I think it's funny. I was just talking to my buddy about this a moment ago, but Buffalo Trace actually had to respond to consumers who had concern that each one of the letters, barrels, would be different in taste profile. That's not the case. They're just randomly selected and put on there. So rest assured that single barrel consistency is true for Blanton's too. All right, that's a lot of stuff I talked about. Now we're moving to the best part of the evening. We're going to be doing the blind flight fight. So I'm going to pull over glass 1, glass 2, glass 3, and glass 4. I have no idea what's in any one of these glasses as they were put in there for me, and we will be tasting them left to right, starting out there in that order first. Let's slide these over just a smidge. I don't want to actually spill any of these guys. And the idea of this evening is not to get exact tasting notes. Things might pop out, I might say them, but the idea is to really rank these things. And I'll move these forward like they're in a race against one another, because exactly what they're doing. We want to find out if I'm going to go ahead and hunt for what is now, and you can argue whether it's worth it or not, a very hard to find bourbon, especially something like Elmer T Lee. Most of these things sell about 50 plus bucks at MSRP, and they'll go anywhere up to $300 or $400 a piece. So we'll find out if you're willing to pay that. Good on you. That's all means dependent, personal dependent. But we're going to find out which one might be worth it a touch more than the other. So starting out with glass one, we'll go ahead and take a look first at the color. Very, very light. In fact, they're all fairly light. I'd guess anywhere between 90 to 100 proof. But the nose on this actually has a nice bit of character to it. A lot of vanilla and cinnamon, which is very common for mash bill 2 across the board, at least in my experience. I think I'll find that to be the case amongst them all. But who cares about that? Because we're going to be talking about the taste. Very light body, not so much cinnamon, a lot of vanilla, a good dose of oak coming in on the mid to end. Not balanced, not bad, but not balanced. Man, that's a lot of vanilla. But there is like a sort of a grape, not grape, but like a darker fruit kind of on the back side of the mid. That gives it a touch more depth and complexity. But other than that, it's actually kind of a fairly simple bourbon. So I can't rank it yet because I haven't tasted the others. But right now it's tied for first. All right, moving to glass two. This one smells like it's heavier in proof, and I can already see, it's coating the side of the glass. I doubt you can see it in this glass. Let me go, ooh, goodness. Give it a good spin. And you might note there is some viscosity on that I don't think I've seen. This one, the last one really didn't carry that. This one's definitely a bit thicker. This one definitely tastes like it's got more depth. That vanilla is still there. That oak is still there, but more subtle than glass one. Those notes are more subtle than glass one for sure. I think this is a more refined bourbon than glass one. So I'm going to go ahead and slide this forward to current first place. Take a quick rinse here. Let that dry out a touch. I like glass one. I just think it's really vanilla forward and too simple. You might think simple in the way that I would find like a Basil Hayden 80 proof. It's very light, so maybe if I'm guessing, and I don't want to do that quite yet, because I don't really, these are half full, but this is all the time I've ever spent with these bourbons, minus Blanton's. I've had my fair share of it. But I would guess it's probably the lightest proof of the bunch, which, if memory serves, what was it, Elmer T Lee at 90 proof? Maybe that for glass one is that, I don't know, but it tastes like the lightest proof so far. All right, glass three. Yeah, it does not have that. It's maybe a similar consistency, but the glass two definitely takes the cake on that. Nose-wise is much more enjoyable than the other two so far. This one has more of that fruit and more oak. It's a bit tannic on the end, but there's a lot more fruit than the rest. I don't know. I want to say hardly any vanilla, but I'm going to have to taste 2 and 3 next to each other because so far I think they're tied. But if I had to guess right now, I'm going to say that glass 2 is probably just a touch over it because there's a tannic note right now. For me, on the end finish of glass 3, that's just, it's not singing to me. So I'm gonna hold out. I'm gonna compare them. I'm gonna be doing this until most of these are gone. But right now, glass 3 is in what's that one? 2 second place. What really matters is once we go ahead and gotten a little bit of all 4. So very thin, much like you saw in glass 1, coating the glass. The nose is actually a little more reminiscent to glass 1 in the sense that it's got a lot of vanilla, but it's got some floral notes on it too. This one's probably might be the winner. I really like this so far. I'm gonna slide this up here just as a placeholder as I continue to taste because I'm gonna slide these over so I don't actually bump into these guys. I'd hate for that to happen. It's got that same tannic stuff going on at the end a touch, whereas glass 1 and glass 2 did not have that. But I think this one has some more depth to it than I found on the other 2 middle glasses there, 2 and 3. Let's go ahead and take another gander at it. Very fruity, a touch floral. There is some vanilla, throughout the finish. Starts out heavier. I don't know. I think it's gonna be tough. These are all fairly similar. Surprise. They're all single barrels from Buffalo Trace, mash bill 2, probably relatively along the same ages, even the fact that they're all undisclosed. And within a matter of, what's the highest proof? 100 proof, 90, 88.9, and 93. So we'll call it 89 to 90 or to 100. So what's that? 11? Oh man, I am not good at math. So do that for me. Leave it in the comments. We're gonna go ahead and I think we'll try to figure out glasses 2 and 3 first before we figure out again because I think these were the closest that I had to concern myself with. Very light, balanced, some vanilla. As compared to glass 3. I think glass 3 is going to beat over just a bit because there's a little bit more depth to glass 2 so far. These are all tough. They're all really similar. Glass 1. It's not bad, but glass 1's easily 4th, I think. I'm just going to go ahead and make that call now. I got to start doing the process of elimination. We'll be here all night. Not that that's an awful thing when we're drinking and talking about bourbon. But I got other bourbon to drink. I like the floral notes on glass 4. It just gives it something different amongst the 4. So I don't know how it might stand up by itself. But when you got bourbons that really are dancing nearly the same dance, and you got somebody doing a little bit of pizzazz on the side, your eye's kind of drawn to them. Good, bad, or indifferent. But I think that's what's happening on glass 4. But surprisingly, it's going 1, 2, 3, 4 for me so far. I want us to drink glass 2 again. Nice fruity note, really well balanced. So I have a buddy off camera here as well. He's doing the tasting with me, and I'm looking over his lineup, and he's actually got the same order so far, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I started off with glass 2, being better than Glass 3, but then I swapped it because it's a lot heavier on the oak.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
So I think we're probably singing the same song here. I feel comfortable with that because this one's got that little floral pizzazz. It's got a nice little dose of oak. Even though Glass 3 and 4 have a little tannic stuff going on and just a touch, just a 1% thing, I think that is okay. Yeah, I'm gonna call it. This is the order. This one's got a pop of rye actually. Glass 3 just gave me a little pop of rye, and it's good. It deserves second place. Well, we'll go in place order here. So glass number 1 is. I'm feeling this is gonna be my shirt is gonna be. I'm gonna end up wearing it. Pun intended. I sure am. Blanton's. Blanton's is glass 4. Well, there you have it. I spoiled it. All right, so let's see. Glass number 2, Elmer T Lee, which I've always said Elmer T Lee is overhyped in my opinion. This is the one I'm most concerned with. Wow. Glass 3, Rock Hill Farms. What does that leave? Get out of town.
Hancock.
Get out of town. Hancock's President Reserve, the lowest proof. I'm a cash drink guy 100% of the time, all day, every day, except for one day, today apparently. Hancock's President's Reserve wins first place. That's just absolutely mind-blowing. Boom. Right? Boom. Wow. I knew Elmer T Lee wasn't going to be my favorite. I've always said it's overhyped and you overpay for it. Blanton's, look, this is one of that's my dailies. I got a bunch of Blantons under the counter here. That this is one I love it. It's my gateway bourbon that got me into bourbon. I'm always gonna have a special place for it. I think it's fine. It's simple, but it does not deserve the $250, $300 that people are paying for it in the market. Please don't do that. It's a $55, $60 bottle at MSRP. Stop. Pay for it at that MSRP. It deserves that. Rock Hill Farms, I still don't know how I feel about it. I just put it in a blind flight fight, and I still don't know how I feel about it. Because it does get all, you pay a lot of money for it. It's got a cool, fancy square bottle. Looks really cool, right? This does look cool. This looks cool as hell. Got horses. Who doesn't like horses? Apparently, Mash Bill 2 has a little horse theme going on. Blanton's, Rock Hill Farms. But Hancock's President's Reserve. This is the last of the Mash Bill 2 that I ever had. 88.9. Well, there you have it. I'm just literally in shock. But that's why I like doing blind flight fights. I think it really shows you, removes that bias, and it shows you exactly, what your palate really wants. But this blind flight, if I did tomorrow, might shake out a touch different. So I have a little bit more to spare, so I just might do that. But until then, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and end out with the best of the evening and say cheers to everybody. If you've had, 1, 2, 3, 4 of these, let me know what you think. And, if you haven't, I guess look for Hancock's President's Reserve, HPR. Cheers.